I always like to say I came to missions kicking and screaming. I grew up as a pastor's kid in a ministry home, so grew up with a love for a church, and of course, never had a desire to leave the church, but never really wanted to go into ministry for myself. And over time, my initial plan was to go to law school, but over time, the Lord made it clear to me that seminary was my next step. But I said, okay, fine, I'll go to seminary, but I will not be a missionary. Despite the fact that I'd been on a lot of missions trips and I was already studying Spanish, that was just not something that I was interested in doing. And so this summer between my junior and senior years of college, I was doing a devotional on the life of Abraham. And I thought, okay, I know what my testimony is going to be because I know the story of Abraham. And I know that Abraham has a son. And toward the end of his life, God asks him to sacrifice Isaac on the altar. And there he is at this pinnacle moment of his life, ready to sacrifice his hopes and his dreams and his future. And at the last minute, God swoops in and says, no, never mind. You don't have to do that. This is just a test. So I thought, this is going to be my testimony. I am going to tell God that I'm willing to be a missionary, but then at the last minute, he's going to say, no, that was just a test of faith. Here's your nice, comfortable job in the United States. So that was my plan. And as it happened that summer, I was studying in Colombia for a little while, in the country of Colombia. And so I sat down one day to do my devotions and I said, okay, here it is. Like, here's where God's going to let me off the hook. And I didn't get the story of Abraham and Isaac. I got Genesis 12. And in the particular translation of that devotional book, it actually said, get out of your country and your father's household to a land which I will show you. And the reflection question off to the side said something like, would you leave your country and your family to follow God to a place of his choosing? And as much as I'd like to say it was this high and holy moment of thy will be done, it was more like, oh no, here it is, because that was the moment that I knew. And I knew what God had for me and God had in store. It wasn't the end of the battle. It wasn't the last battle. I think I was a little bit like Jacob in this wrestle with God. And yet, as I wrestled with God, God showed me along the way, he was very faithful to give me step by step what I needed to be willing to take the next step. So ultimately, I went to seminary. I went back to Colombia to do an internship. And that's where I fell in love with Colombia, fell in love with the work, fell in love with God's call for my life. And at that point, I was all in, was ready to pursue what God had for me. So there's been a lot of shifts and twists and turns since then. But ever since that moment, I knew that this is what the Lord had for me. And it's been quite a journey, but it's been a joyful one.